Hey, there I am. Hey, welcome everybody to First Attack. I am James Chen, aka jchensor, the second half of the UltraChen duo. In case you guys are new to First Attack or not sure what First Attack is, it's a series of videos where I try to teach as much of the basics of Street Fighter as possible to help you guys learn how to play the game. The series is meant for beginners to intermediate. I go over a lot of low-level concepts and try to help a lot of players really start to understand and get into fighting games, because I know a lot of people out there really want to learn how to play. They have a lot of trouble getting in there. So today, of course, obviously today is a Tuesday, and normally we do UltraChen Tuesday show. However, David is not available today, so I will be doing instead a First Attack episode. And today's topic that we are going to talk about is actually a pretty important topic, and that's going to be frames and frame data. The reason why I feel like this is really important to talk about, I actually had originally intended to do this much later, because there was a lot of other more beginner concepts that I wanted to talk about before getting into the nitty-gritty about frame data and frames. However, the biggest problem with this now is that, I've seen a lot of people trying to get into Street Fighter. They're using all of the resources out there. They're checking out all the YouTube videos. They're checking out Shoryuken.com forums, and they're watching all these tutorial videos. They're watching tournaments, and you hear commentators talk about stuff a lot of times. And the biggest problem is that everything talks about frames. Everywhere you go regarding Street Fighter, anytime you want to learn Street Fighter, everyone talks about frames. You hear terms like, this is -5, or, hey, this is safe on block. Oh, that was a frame trap. Or, hey, this is a good thing here because this starts up in 2 frames. And there's really just no way to avoid the concept of frames, because everybody talks about it all the time. And it's something that's very vital to fighting games. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about frames, and then how they apply to the game. Why are they so important? Why is it that everybody wants to talk about it? And why does everybody use it, to describe things? This move is 3-frame startup. This move has really bad frame advantage, etc., etc. So I'm basically going to divide this episode into 4 parts. The first part is I'm going to give a very basic explanation of what frames are. The second part that I'm going to be doing is that I am going to be talking about frame data. So a lot of people talk about frame data. Go check out Ryu's frame data. Go check out, Zangief's frame data. And so there's these tables full of numbers that you see everywhere, and you look at them, and if you don't know what frame data is, if you don't know what frames are, it doesn't make any sense. You just see all these numbers. So I'm going to talk about frame data a little bit. I'm going to go over frame data and why it's useful and why it's something that a lot of people should be paying attention to. Third part I'm going to do is, okay, so you look at all these numbers in the frame data. What does it do for me? How do I interpret all this information? I see all these numbers. They don't mean anything to me. They're just numbers. Like, how is it that, a player can go, you know what? Let me look at Karen's frame data. Look at it and go, oh, okay, I know now. I'm not supposed to do stuff after I block this move. I'm supposed to attack right here, etc., etc. So I want to talk about that, and then also go into the concept a lot of people have been talking about recently. There's this concept of taking turns. You've probably heard Flo talk about this. He had one whole episode of flow charts dedicated to that. So I'm going to talk about how to interpret frame data, and then basically get into taking turns and why frame data is seemingly so much more important to Street Fighter V than it has been to previous Street Fighter games. Like in Street Fighter 4, a lot of people studied frame data, but in my opinion, it wasn't as important. Older Street Fighter games, we didn't have frame data. Nobody really cared. But I feel like in Street Fighter V, frame data is more important than ever. And so that's what this episode is for, to help you understand what frames are and to help you understand what frame data does and tells you. what kind of information you can glean out of this. So let's just get started with the very basics. What are frames? What is it that we are talking about when we talk about frames? Well, the easiest way to describe this is just think of an animated film, right? You basically draw one cell at a time, is what they're called, one picture at a time. You stick a whole bunch of them in a row, and when you show them in rapid succession, it gives you the illusion of movement, and basically that creates animation. Video games are no different, right? So you basically just have single pictures, if you want to call it that, and one by one they get played after each other, and that creates the illusion of movement, and it creates animation. Now, most consoles these days output in 60 frames per second. So when I talk about these pictures, there's 60 of them happening in 1 second. That's how a lot of video games are displayed. That's why everything looks so smooth when you watch video games, when you watch videos in 60 frames per second. For example, on YouTube, if you watch it at a normal rate and then you switch it to 60 frames per second, all of a sudden it looks a lot smoother. It's because they're showing more frames per second. And that's all frames really are, is just the animation of your character doing moves. So I want to show you an example of this. I apologize ahead of time. I really tried to get an example from Street Fighter V. Unfortunately, I was having trouble getting some videos to play and such, so I am going to show you an example of reuse animations from Street Fighter IV. But understand that this concept of frames applies to all fighting games. This is not even just a Street Fighter thing. Frames are a universal video game thing. In fact, you could count frame data for any game you wanted if it was really pertinent, but for fighting games it's especially important. So I'm going to bring up a little bit of Street Fighter IV animation here. So let's take a look at this here. Oops. Where are we here? There we are. Okay, so here's Ryu in Street Fighter IV. Now what's going to happen is he's going to do a standing light kick. Of course, this is going to look different because the kick is not the same anymore at this point in time. So if we click, if I go frame by frame, you can see there's his neutral frame here. You can barely see it, but his arms are moving slightly because he's bobbing. Now, he's starting to do his light kick. So this is the first frame of his light kick. And if I go frame by frame, here we go. One, there's the next frame, next frame, next frame, and then finally he kicks. So that's basically his standing light kick animating. And then basically if I keep making it go, then he puts his leg down, boom, there you go. That's all frames really are. So if I play this at normal speed, let's see here, if I play this at normal speed, boom. You see how fast that is? So again, there's 60 frames per second in a Street Fighter game. So you can see how fast that kick went. And I can show you again with the medium kick, for example, here. So he's going to do, so I'm clicking frame by frame. You can probably hear my mouse clicking over the microphone, to be honest with you. There we go, stand medium kick, and he comes back down. So that's all frames really are. They're just animation. They're just each step of a character's animation. Everything that a character does in any video game really comes down to animation frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So why do we talk about frames so much? Why are frames so important? Well, the best way to think about frames in the terms of a fighting game is really that frames are just a measurement of time. As I said, there's 60 frames per second. So that is the universal measure of time for a video game, especially these moves in a fighting game. So if you think of frames just as a measurement of time, you start to understand where the importance of it comes from. And one of the things I like to do is try to make analogies to non-video gaming things, to real-world stuff, to real-world examples. So in this particular case, what I'm going to try to do is talk about frames. So what I'm going to recommend to people is think about frames as if you are running a race. Okay, let's just think of it as a foot race. Let's think of it as a foot race that you're running from point A to point B, right? So if I sit here and tell you that from point A to point B, Toad here can run from distance A to B in 3 seconds, that means he's pretty fast, right? He can run pretty fast to that distance there. But if I told you Bowser here, he's all big and heavy and lumbering, if he tries to run from point A to point B, it's going to take him 10 seconds. It's going to take him 10 seconds to get there. So he's a lot slower than that, right? That's kind of how you want to picture moves in Street Fighter. When people talk about frame data and moves, for example, if they say Ryu's standing light punch is 3 frames, that means it's a very fast move. It's a very quick move. If I say that Ryu's standing hard kick is 10 frames, that means it's slow to come out. And what you want to imagine is that the finish line, point B, what you're trying to get to, that is when your move finally hits. So that is what we call active frame. Everything from the start of the race all the way to the end of the race is known as startup frames. So this is the most important part about frames, is usually the startup of your moves. So again, if you have a move that's really fast, Toad, you're gonna run there, three frames, boom, you're at the end. Your move is gonna hit. If you're slow like Bowser, it's gonna take you 10 frames to get over there. So in other words, if you have 2 characters standing next to each other, one of them has a 3-frame move and one of them has a 10-frame move, and they're both standing at the starting line, and I say, go! Well, they're gonna start running, and Toad is gonna completely leave Bowser in the dust. 3 seconds later, he's gonna get to the finish line. So the guy who hit the 3-frame normal is going to beat the guy who hit the 10-frame normal, because he's going to get to the finish line first, and so he's going to hit the opponent before the opponent can hit him. It takes him 10 frames to get all the way over there. 3 frames is going to win. That's why a lot of people talk about frames, because it is a measurement of time. Everything that you talk about in Street Fighter, whether it's quick rises or how long does it take for you to jump, how long is your backdash, how long is your jab, how long is your light punch, I should say, how long is your crouching heavy kick, how long is your standing heavy punch. That's basically what frames are. So thank you guys. That's how I want you to picture frames, okay? I want you to picture it as a measurement of time. This is how I want you to think about them. And you'll see how this applies as we move along through this day, through this lesson here. You'll see why this is very important to understand, thinking about it as a measurement of time. Keep that race analogy in mind, because I will come back to it in just a little bit. So again, frames, animation frames, just one picture at a time, and it's kind of a measurement of time. You want to picture it as a length of time that it takes for you to do something like that. Now that we have kind of a concept of what frames are, if anybody has any questions in the chat, please let me know, and I'll be able to try to explain that a little bit more. I will get into, so someone asks here, what are the plus and minus frames? I'll get that into a little bit. Okay, so here we go. Let's look at frame data. Okay, let's take a look at frame data and see what we're trying to figure out what's going on here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to reuse frame data here. This is available on wiki.shoryuken.com /Street Fighter V. You basically, if you go there, you can check out all the frame data. This is a shameless plug. I've put together a lot of this frame data. All the data was gathered by Mr. Gilly3D, Sean Gilly, aka @Gilly3D on Twitter. So shout outs to him. He actually went through and counted all the frames for every character for all of their normal moves and such. Also, I will be maintaining this table along with Eternal Star, who is in the chat right now. The two of us will actually be doing a lot of work to maintain this frame data. But let's take a look at this frame data, okay? Let's take a look at this and try to figure out what all these numbers mean. I mean, look at all these numbers. Seriously, this is daunting. This is really, really confusing. A lot of people are looking at this and going, I don't get this. Why? What is all these numbers? And, you know, hands to the head, like, oh my God, I have no idea what's going on. So what I want to do is mention that every move, as I said, basically they take animation frames, right? So let's go back to my example over here. As soon as Windows Media Player speeds up a little bit, but I guess not. Let's see if I can do. Oh, there we go. Okay. So again, if I start a move, like let's say Ryu starts a move here. Come on, there we go. So he has a whole set of animation frames to go through. Boom. Okay. There are 3 stages to every normal move. Well, actually every move in this game, pretty much every move, there are 3 frames. 3 stages, I should say. There's always going to be startup. There's going to be active frames. And there's going to be recovery frames. Now, all those 3 combined together create a total moves animation. And it's kind of clear, like that I was talking about. Let's go back to that race analogy, right? We have startup frames. So basically, that's the time it takes for you to run to the finish line. You have active frames. That's when you get through the finish line. And let's think of recovery frames as your ability to stop once you've crossed the finish line. If you have someone super light like Toad, and he crosses the finish line, he's probably going to be able to stop pretty fast as well, right? If you have someone like Bowser, once he crosses the finish line, his momentum is huge. He weighs so much so that it's going to take him a little while to stop, right? You can even think of it in terms of cars. As soon as a lighter car is going to be able to stop a lot easier than a heavier car once they cross through a finish line. Or just hit the brakes, floor the brakes. You know, a lighter car is going to stop a little bit quicker than a heavier car because the heavier car just has so much momentum going behind it. So that's basically what startup, active, and recovery frames are. It's the period of your move before it can hit you. Then the active frames are the period of time that your move can hit you. And then the recovery frames are after the move finishes hitting so that it can't hit anymore. You have to finish this animation. It's the follow-through. It's the follow-through, just like a standard normal punch, right? If you actually do a hook punch, you know, before you hit the guy and after you hit the guy, you've got this follow-through. That's recovery frames. So let's look at all these numbers here. If you actually look at all these numbers, you're going to see that every move here, including standing light punch, standing medium punch, standing heavy punch, and these are the real frame data for Ryu and Street Fighter V, you're going to see that there's 3 numbers here associated with every move: startup, active, and recovery. I can get into a little bit of details here. I don't want to confuse people too much. But basically what this means is that there are 11 total frames that it takes to animate this move. In other words, whenever I hit light punch on the controller, Ryu is going to go through 11 frames of animation to start, to hit, and to recover back from his light punch. Now, of course, a lot of you guys are looking at this and going, James, that's 7 plus 3 plus 2, that's 12. What are you talking about 11 frames? Do you not know math? Have you failed math? Are you not Asian at all? And what I'm going to talk about here is that there's a really, really irritating thing in frame data notation, in that for some unknown reason, I don't know when this happened, but it started around Street Fighter IV, that the last startup frame is also the first active frame. So if I go back to these numbers here, 3, 2, 7. The third startup frame is the same thing as the first active frame. So this is actually 2 plus 2 plus 7. So that's actually 11. It's confusing. I know, and I really honestly wish it wasn't like this. And in fact, when I made this wiki table, I had really honestly considered changing it so it didn't do this anymore. But unfortunately, this is how everything does it. This is how the internal MKX frame data does it. This is how internal KI frame data does this. This is how the Brady Games guide for Street Fighter V does it. Everything does it this way. I can't change it. I can't change it at all. So basically, once again, to look at frame data, you have to understand that the very last startup frame is the frame that it'll hit on. So in other words, if you see 3 like this, and you go and you count to yourself 1, 2, 3 frames, the third frame, you're crossing the finish line. You've already got to the finish line. So again, that's really kind of confusing. Now, there's a lot more to these numbers than just startup active recovery. A lot of people look at that frame data, but that's not necessarily that's not all that there is in frame data. What ends up happening is that there's a couple of other numbers that a lot of people use. And again, this is really confusing, and I apologize, but hopefully when I start talking about how to apply all of this stuff, a lot of this will start making more sense. So, let's go back to these numbers here again. We have startup, we have active, and we have recovery frames, right? So you know basically what the total number of frames it takes to do a move is. The thing about it now here is that what starts to become important is those are the frames, those are the numbers that you care about if your buttons are missing, like if they're not hitting the opponent necessarily. What becomes really important here are these extra 2 numbers over here. Advantage on guard and advantage on hit. Okay, so these are 2 very important numbers here. And they're very much related to the frame data. And now you're asking yourself, how the heck does all this data apply? Like, what do you mean that these numbers apply to frame data? So what is advantage on guard and what is advantage on hit? Well, let me do something over here. Let's go over here. As soon as, hello XSplit, please change camera views. There we go. So here we go. So I'm going to walk around here like this, and I'm going to hit the opponent. Boom. So I'm hitting him, right? Okay, I'm hitting him. Now I'm going to set the computer to all block. And he's blocking my move, like so. So he's defending against my move here. So block, and then of course, like I said, set him to hit, and now I'm punching him and hitting him. So very important concepts here. If you connect with your opponent, those are the only 2 basically options that you're going to get. Is you're going to get a hit or you're going to get a block. Now, when you hit the character, when you actually punch him in the face, you notice that, the reaction of the character is to kind of go, ah! They get hit and they reel back and they go, ah! And, they're kind of, they have to animate. Same thing as, doing a move. When you punch them, they have this reeling animation that has to go through a certain number of frames as well. And it doesn't matter how many frames they go through this. That's not important. All you have to know is that they're stuck going like this. Ah! And pretty much after you punch them and they're going ah! And reeling back like this, during the course of that time, if you hit them with another move, that's what a combo is. Because when they're hit and they're reeling, they're stuck that way. They can't do anything. They can't defend. They can't do any moves. So you throw another move into them and you hit them, and that's what a combo is. This is the entire concept of combos, is that you keep hitting the opponent during their reeling animation so that they can never recover in time to get to a point where they can defend. That animation of when you hit the character and they go ah like that and then come back to normal, that is known as hit stun. The amount of time that your character takes to reel is called hit stun. Now, when they defend a move, they block. They block, but then you notice what happens when they block is that they're kind of stuck in this blocking animation for a little while. You know, they block and they're stuck. So again, same kind of concept here as hit stun, except rather than getting hit, you're blocking. So if I hit you with a move and you block it, before your block animation ends, and I hit you with another move, you're forced to block that as well because you haven't recovered from your defense. You haven't recovered from the block, so you can't recover and do anything yet. That's kind of known as a block string, a true block string. If I hit you with a move and then during your block stun, as opposed to hit stun, if I hit you out of your block stun with another move and you block it, that's called a true block string because there's nothing you can do in between those two hits. You have to block both of them because the second one came fast enough. So let's go back to the game over here. So we have the game here like this. So this, boom, you see him reel? You see Nash go, ah! He goes, ah! Reels his head back and throws his headphones off his head. When you jump kick him like that, if I hit another button and hit him during that hit stun, I get a 2-hit combo. Boom, 2-hit combo, right? Boom, boom, 2-hit combo. Or I can do the 2-hit combo because I hit him with this move and then I still hit him again while he's reeling. 2-hit combo. If he's blocking everything and I do something like this, boom, boom, what he's actually doing is blocking a kick and he's stuck in block animation. Look at his arm. His arm stays up. Boom. And you see how when he lowers his arm, that's when he's finally out of block stun. But if I do 2 moves fast enough, like that, he can't get out of it in time. He's forced to block the second hit. So that's known as a true block string. That's block stun. And as I mentioned, if he's not blocking, that's a combo. That's a combo because the second hit hit him before he recovered. Now, the reason why I talk about this, the reason why I'm mentioning this, is because hit stun and block stun are very important concepts to learn. Again, when you get hit and you go, that's hit stun. When you block a move and your arm, and you're in your defensive posture until you can move again, that's block stun. The reason why it's very important to talk about these things is because hit stun, as I said, has a set number of frames that it has to go through to finish animating, and block stun has that as well. The problem is that in Street Fighter V, same with Street Fighter 4, same with Mortal Kombat X, for example, same with Killer Instinct. A lot of games do this now. This wasn't the case a long time ago, but now a lot of modern games do this. Hit stun is generally longer than block stun. Every time you hit somebody, if I hit someone with a heavy punch, the animation of them going, is always going to be slightly longer than if they block my heavy punch. If they block my heavy punch, it's like block, and then they're ready to go. That block stun animation, I would say in 99% of the moves in this game, there may be exceptions. I'm not sure which ones they are yet because we're still learning this game a lot. 99% of the times, hit stun is going to be longer than block stun.